Plan for America podcast is a show dedicated to national unity through prosperity that's achieved by free market capitalism. We believe that a rising tide does lift all boats. This show will be positive, solution-oriented, and nonpartisan. Our only agenda is for the prosperity of our country and her people. All are welcome here. This show will not be argumentative or incendiary, sensational, or polarizing and divisive. What we are presenting is a positive solution to one of America's greatest problems. Hello and welcome to Plan for America podcast, coming to you from Dynamic Reality Technologies on the campus of Coastal Alabama Community College in Fairhope, Alabama. I'm your host, Eric Nager, and our guest today is the author of Plan for America, Terry Nager. Welcome, Terry.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
And I want to point our viewers and our listeners to the very first podcast episode with Dr. Kyra Latine, and he kind of explains what Plan for America is. And today we're going to learn more what Plan for America does from Terry. So Terry, if you could quickly give us your background. I know you're a certified financial planner. You're also a chartered life underwriter and a chartered financial consultant. All of those are your professional designations. You've been doing this for 40 years in the financial services industry. What's kind of the history of Plan for America? How did it come to you?
Well, in my practice of financial planning, the important thing is helping people solve financial problems and plan for the future of their life. And in 2004, when President George W. Bush at the time proposed a partial privatization of Social Security. In other words, be invested in stocks. And that was bad timing. It was a good idea, but bad timing. The market had just gone through a pretty severe correction from 2000 to 2002, and people were very worried about stocks, and so they were not very receptive to having their Social Security partially vulnerable to the fluctuations of the market. And so he was rejected in that, but it got me to thinking, there really needs to be a way to get greater returns on the money that's invested in the Social Security program, and yet still have the government guarantees. So I began to mull that over, and over the next few years, came up with Plan for America.
I think it's fair to say that Plan for America is a reasonably comprehensive financial plan for every American citizen, including the 5 elements of financial planning. What are those elements?
Yeah, the 5 elements, the first, insurance, which covers disability, health, long-term care, and life. Then there's investment planning, retirement planning, tax planning, and estate planning. Estate or legacy planning.
Estate, right. Your legacy to your heirs. Okay. And as I understand it, Plan for America, I want to make this point too, it's unlike any other plan you have ever heard. Because all the other plans to try to solve our national debt and deficit problem merely tweak the current system. They means test, they raise retirement age, something little nibbles around the edges that don't fundamentally solve the problem. This plan is completely different from anything you have heard. I want to emphasize that up front.
Well, and adding to that, most of the other approaches have been each side give up a little bit, the extended retirement age, increase the tax amount, things like that. And what you had is unhappy constituents that don't want to give up anything And that's why no plan has successfully been put together to resolve the unfunded liabilities from Social Security and Medicare, where the Plan for America benefits all constituencies.
Well, can you tell us a little about the history of Social Security and these social programs and why they're in so much trouble now?
All right, when Social Security began in the 1930s, there were many more contributors than there were retirees. There were about 30 to 1. And so there were surpluses being built up in the Social Security Trust Fund, and that was great, and everything was covered. But the politicians said, okay, there's all that money, let's start increasing the benefits. And so they kept raising the benefits and making it better and better, which is popular with voters, but not considering the long-term financial health of the system. And then around the 1980s, they said, well, look at all that money in there, we can access that money. And so politicians said, we'll take the money out, we'll put in government notes, and they said, well, that should be fine because they're interest bearing and safe from the government, because they're government guaranteed. And so they thought that was fine. The problem was those were not negotiable government notes. In other words, they couldn't be sold. So the only way to get money out is to redeem the notes, pay them off. And our government has a huge government deficit every year, this year in the trillions of dollars. And the debt, 28 trillion plus, there's no money to redeem the notes so that they can pay out benefits to the retirees. So the only way they can get money is to borrow more money. So in effect, they have rated it, it's empty because they don't have the money to redeem the notes. They just have to borrow it. So that's why the system's in trouble. That and the fact that there's only 3 people contributing, 2 to 3 people for every 1 retiring. So
yes, the demographics are all bad, and it's even worse on the healthcare side because of the aging population. So now pivoting to provisions of the plan, one very unique aspect of it is that it does not depend on legislation to be enacted. It is to be founded on contract law. How do you envision that working?
Okay, well, first you do need some legislation to enable the entering into the contract for the state. It's a contractual agreement between the federal government, 50 states, and the trust for the people, the retirement and healthcare trust. And but the legislation would enable those parties to enter into a contract. The reason for the contract is because it's more permanent than just legislation. Because if you have legislation that's passed by the House and the Senate and the President signs it, becomes law. But if after 4 years you have a different party in power in the House, the Senate, and the President, they can reverse that. And this is, people are going to be counting on this for their long-term retirement, their health care, the soundness of our financial system, with the debt and deficits and things like that. And so it needs to be more permanent. A contract is much harder to break than just changing legislation. And the permanence of a contract is how beneficial it is to all parties. And this will benefit everyone, benefit the federal government, benefit the states, and benefit the individuals. And that's how you get a long-lasting contract.
All right, well, let's dive into some of the provisions of the contract. Let's start with the federal level. What are some of the provisions there in terms of debt deficit and unfunded liabilities?
Okay, the federal government is a great beneficiary of this. They get to be let out of the unfunded liabilities. And those are future monies that are owed for Social Security and Medicare. And that's estimated to be over $100 trillion. So being free of that is a major thing. Also, federal deficits should be reduced almost immediately, and then long-term be eliminated, and along with the federal debt. So a lot of benefits for the government. The government has to make some concessions, some tax concessions, they have to enable the trust to function so that it can take in the money that would normally go, the 15.3% that goes to the payroll tax. And that's 7.65 from the employer, 7.65% from the employee, together 15.3. That would go into the trust for each individual. The money that people earn, that money that currently goes to payroll tax would go into an account in their own name for their own benefit. And that's a benefit for the people. It also pays for the health care for people who cannot afford it. So
Okay.
a lot of benefits there. And then the states, they benefit from being relieved of their Medicaid expense and their unfunded liabilities, which are the two major causes of the state's deficit and debt problems.
All right. Those are the provisions of the contract. I think this is a good stopping point. We're going to take a break here with Terry Nager, and we're going to be right back on Plan for America podcast. If you like what you're hearing and want to learn more about Plan for America, visit our website at www.planforamerica.us. There's an extensive Q&A section there, and if you don't see a question you have, then please ask us by email. You can order our book, Plan for America, How to Place the American Dream on a Sure Foundation Forever. That can be found on Amazon.com. You can like us on Facebook. And if you really like what you're hearing, you're welcome to contribute through our website. Plan for America is a nonprofit 501c3 organization, and all contributions are tax deductible. And welcome back for Plan for America podcast. I'm your host, Eric Nager. Our guest today is, full disclosure, my brother, Terry Nager, the founder of Plan for America, the author of it, the architect of it, whatever you want to call it. And more details about it, of course, can be found in our book. We're really just trying to get the word out. And this podcast talks about what Plan for America does, how it works. I'll refer our listeners back and our viewers to Dr. Kyle Latina. In the first podcast, he tells us what Plan for America is. You were just before the break, Terry, you were talking about the provisions of the contract. Once the contract is enacted, will people be compelled to get into the trust, or what are the options people have then at that point?
Yeah, it's totally voluntary. The most people would certainly want to opt in because the benefits are far greater than what they will receive under Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare. It's just far better coverage and far safer because it's not, those programs are funded with government debt and deficits, and they're not direct obligations where this would be, because the government agrees. Part of the provisions of contract is they agree to back the bonds that would be issued by the trust in order to pay out the current Social Security recipients and the healthcare benefits.
All right, so let's talk about how it's better, because there are certain levels of guarantees here. First of all, just on the retirement side, those who opt in would be able to have the 15.3% of payroll taxes that they and their employer are currently paying diverted into a private account in the individual's name, invested in an all U.S. market domiciled index. So there's no decision about what to invest in. No one's picking winners or losers. And it would be almost cost-free to operate such an index because it could be bid out to big companies like Vanguard or BlackRock, and they might charge a basis point or two, so almost nothing.
Right.
So the 15.3% would be invested. Now, current retirees would have to be paid out their Social Security benefits. The promises have to be kept to the current retirees. Talk about the three levels of guarantee within the plan here.
Okay. For a person, their money is going into the trust, the 15.3%. It's growing at the market returns less 2%, which is what the trust charges to operate and to fund all these other programs. And that long term, the market returns have been over the last 90 plus years have been about 10%. So 10 minus 2 is 8. But this program, the PFA, is only built on an assumption of a 6.2% return, which is like 40% below historic norm, historic what it is done historically, and it works at that level. And that is, but what it guarantees to the individual is upon retirement, they will have whatever Social Security would pay is one level guarantee. Second would be all of their contributions growing at 4% compounded and paying out 4% per year. And the third would be the value of the account at the end of the previous year, paying out 4% of that. So whichever of the three is the highest is what gets paid to the individual. So the worst that it can be is what Social Security presently is.
Right. And what makes it even better than Social Security, even if it's at the lowest level of guarantee, is that this plan allows a cash flow that's triggered in retirement in perpetuity, unlike Social Security, which ends when you and your spouse pass. This cash flow can go on to your heirs in perpetuity, and it's also tax-free income. So you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, the money that goes in, the 15.3 is tax deductible. It grows without anything coming out. And then when it pays out, all payouts are tax-free, and it passes on to heirs, estate, and income tax-free. So it's a real benefit. It gives someone who has almost, say all they have is their Social Security income, and they don't have anything for their heirs. This enables them to leave a legacy for their children or grandchildren, or whoever they want, that's something that they would not have otherwise. And it would be the same as what they were receiving. So it's a very substantial benefit.
It is. And there also, as we were emphasizing earlier, this plan has a funding mechanism to actually pay down debts and deficits, not just inflate the money away or kick the can down the road, depending upon the level of market returns that we actually get. Let's say if this was enacted today, our estimates are that all unfunded liabilities would be gone somewhere between 2054 and 2071, depending again on the assumptions about market returns. Please explain the funding mechanism, Terry, this 2% you alluded to earlier.
Yes. Well, if assuming almost universal participation in the plan, the 15.3% of payroll tax is roughly equivalent to about $1 trillion. It's over $1 trillion. Let's say $1 trillion goes in to the trust. And with a 2% charge, that's $20 billion the trust would generate. Then the second year, there'd be another $1 trillion contributed. So 2% of that would be 40 billion. And then the third year, another $1 trillion, and it'd be 60 billion. So what you have this ever increasing cash flow. And that cash flow, as it increases, it will pay out the Social Security benefits that are due people. And then when it exceeds that, then we can start to retire the bonds that were issued to pay out the benefits presently for these people, because like you said, they have to be taken care of.
That's right.
The present recipients, and also for the healthcare benefits. So there are two things going on. You have an ever increasing cash flow, and you have an ever decreasing liability because each year more of the Social Security participants would be switching over from, as their accounts become more and more funded, there'd be less payout coming from the trust, more from their own investment, that 4% guaranteed coming
Yes.
from investment. And so the liabilities are disappearing and the cash flow is ever increasing. And that's how we solve the debt and deficit and unfunded liability problems.
Yeah, it becomes a self-funding system, and then ultimately, way down the road, it replaces taxation as a revenue source for government. So it would replace taxation of any type. Ultimately, I want to pivot to healthcare because that's really the biggest part of the deficit problem. And most of our guests so far in our podcast have been on the retirement side, not on the healthcare side. So let's talk about the provisions of the plan. As I understand it, there will be a universal premium for everyone over age 26. Up to age 26, your kids can still be on the plan. It's $10,000 a year per individual plus a $1,200 HSA or health savings accounts. We're talking about $11,200 a year. If you are single, filing individually your taxes, and you make $40,000 or less, your healthcare premium can be paid by an interest-free loan against your retirement account. And for those married filing jointly, earning $80,000 or less, the same thing is true. So it makes it truly affordable. And let's talk a little about those provisions.
Okay. Yeah, like you said, under 40, it's 100% interest-free loan to cover their health care. And it phases out as they reach up to 70,000 of income or 140.
For individuals.
Right. So that it is truly affordable, and all those entire premiums are tax-free, are tax deductible. And the health savings account is designed to cover the total cost of the copay plus deductible in any year. So $1,200 will cover that. And if they do not use, say they had a year and they had no big medical costs, and if they have any of that $1,200 left at the end of the year, they can withdraw that tax-free. So it's an incentive not to spend their healthcare dollars frivolously. It's there if they need it, but if they don't, then they can get tax-free money back at the end of the year. But
yeah, I understand each policy has $1 million of coverage, and it can be spent on whatever the individual wants. In healthcare, in other words, it could be spent on chiropractic, acupuncture, traditional healthcare. It could be nursing home care for seniors, which is not really covered by Medicare today. Let's talk about that.
Okay, yeah, and including hearing aids, vision, dental.
Anything, right.
Yeah, everything. And so it's a real healthcare plan, and you can use it on any of those various things. Now, if during the course of your lifetime you use up the $1 million, if you had purchased more insurance, then that would be fine. Or if you didn't, then you would be responsible for the money beyond that. However, if you did not have the means or the assets, you're eligible for interest-free loans up to the total amount of whatever your healthcare needs are. And so that is it. It's a real comforting thing, because so many people, if they have a real serious healthcare need, it bankrupts them in the present situation. So, and there are limits in Medicare and everything else, which we don't have here.
Well, let's help our viewers and listeners wrap their arms around the interest-free loans, because let's say there's someone who doesn't even work, okay, and needs health care. One of the principles of Plan for America is no one pays for anyone else's health care. So how do these interest-free loans work with someone, say, who doesn't have a job?
Okay, whenever an interest-free loan is extended to someone, there's automatically life insurance issued to them also. They're like, it's paired with it. Say there was a year, the $11,200, and that was loaned to them. There would be a life insurance policy issued for $11,200 for that individual. The premiums would be added to the loan. So, and the life insurance would be on a unisex, uni-age guarantee issue basis. So it's not a question of it getting more expensive as you get older. It's the same premium for everyone. And that way, no matter how large the amount is that is loaned, it's covered, it's paired with an equivalent amount of life insurance, so the trust will be made whole when the person passes away.
And one significant provision is it doesn't go to pay off the whole loan. The life insurance premium is paid into the retirement account and grows at 4% and pays off the loan over time, if you can touch on that.
Okay, yeah, the idea here is covering what's called the time value of money. Because if you pay out if they were just covered by the life insurance and paid it back, and you'd loan money to this individual for say 40 or 50 years, there'd be no way to recover that cost. This way, say the person owed $100,000. And so the $100,000 life insurance proceeds would go into their account and would pay out 4% per year, $4,000 until the loan was paid off, 25-year maximum. Now, if the market earnings were greater, it would pay off more rapidly. But when this happens, the trust is earning 2% on that money all the way through, and that's how it will recover the cost of the use of money going to the individual. So that's a provision to protect. Again, you want to protect the trust, protect the people,
Right.
Paying for anyone else's health care.
All right, we're running up on our time here. Any other provisions that you want to cover? Anything that, I mean, there's a lot of detail here. We can have you on as a guest again, but this is high level. What other provisions would you like to highlight?
Well, I mean, probably the most important is that the government get out of the deficits and debt situation, because as you know, one thing that's hard to realize or hard to get a hold of, but say we owe about $30 trillion right now in debt. Every 1% increase in interest rates, that's $300 billion in interest that's added to the federal obligation each year. And so, and as that gets bigger and bigger, the 1% is a bigger and bigger amount. And if it goes up more than 1%, it's just, it gets to the point where you can't handle it. And so for the stability of our country, our currency, and everything else, these problems need to be resolved. And this is a potential solution.
Well, thank you for thinking about these problems, Terry. I always like to ask a personal question too. What's a favorite family vacation you've taken?
Probably the favorite is a rafting trip that I took with my two sons, and we went in the Utah and Colorado area, and it was a lot of fun. It was exciting, some white water, you know, category 5 rapids, and it was a lot of fun.
Very good. Well, thank you for being our guest today. We'll be back next time with another episode of Plan for America podcast.
Thank you for having me.
If you like what you're hearing and want to learn more about Plan for America, visit our website at www.planforamerica.us. There's an extensive Q&A section there, and if you don't see a question you have, then please ask us by email. You can order our book, Plan for America, How to Place the American Dream on a Sure Foundation Forever. That can be found on Amazon.com. You can like us on Facebook. And if you really like what you're hearing, you're welcome to contribute through our website. Plan for America is a nonprofit 501c3 organization, and all contributions are tax deductible.